Hello and welcome to a Splice of Life Science Marketing. This episode is brought to you by Humantic AI. Now imagine if you could close 22.5% more deals overnight using a buyer intelligence platform, or imagine slashing prep time by 70% and boosting close one deals by 37%. That's what customers the world over are achieving using Humantic AI's account and buyer intelligence system. The platform provides firmographic and psychographic insights, so every outreach connects better. Scan the QR code to claim your 10% discount. Now, today's podcast is actually a two-parter. Jasmine and I had a great conversation with Bruce Scheer. It was so thorough that we actually split it into two. Bruce is the author of the book Inspire Your Buyers and co-founder of ValuePros.io. In part one, we're going to cover an intro to Bruce and his work, talk a little bit about his book, dive deeply into his value narrative framework, and also cover a wonderful story about a fishing boat. But there's so much more in part two, but I'll save that for when you tune into that one. Now, without further ado, let's get on with the show.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of A Splice of Life Science Marketing. Jasmine and I are joined today by Bruce Scheer, the man, the myth, the legend, and the author of the book, Inspire Your Buyers. Bruce has helped everyone from Microsoft to Tableau crack the code on telling stories that actually kick things off in our buyers' minds. Bruce, when you're speaking with your friends or family, what do you actually tell them you do for a living? How do you explain it?
Boy, if my friends and family have any business intellect, I might say, hey, I help revenue teams get their story straight and go to market that way. And if they're not in a business world, I'll just say, hey, I work with leaders to help them get their story straight. And very often it's not straight. And there's a lot of work to do in this world.
Now, for those that haven't read Inspire Your Buyers, and I strongly recommend really everybody should, what's the core idea behind your value narrative framework? And would you mind explaining it a little bit, please?
Oh, sure. One of the big problems I see in the world is people leading with product. And Matt, probably about a month and a half ago, a CEO got on the phone with me and started to introduce himself. And within, probably 1 minute, he started sharing his screen and showing me his technology platform. And then, a couple more minutes went by. I think he could tell I wasn't too enamored and engaged with this technology platform. So we stopped sharing, thank goodness. And then he asked, hey, Bruce, what do you do? And my response was, I work with salespeople to teach them to do exactly not what you just did with me. And he's like, what? And I'm like going, and I call that leading with product first. Very quickly, we weren't even through introductions and you made it all about you and all about your technology. And he goes, yeah, oh, wow. Yeah, guilty. But I see this happen day in and day out where the product's the hero. And have you guys both seen Lion King? Do you remember where the monkey holds up the baby and everybody bows and, hey, the new king is here? People think of their product that way and they like to showcase it and lead with that. And I call that, the product's the hero. And I even see this is Jensen Huang. I saw him on stage in January at CES and he held up his product. Just like we held up the Lion King. I go, check out this new baby. It's awesome. And everybody bowed. But, that's just so normal, especially in the sciences where you're so excited and passionate about your work. You want to come in and just, let that lead the day. That's your hero. And I argue that works well when it's like a low consideration solution. Your audience kind of understands that and might want to geek out with you on your stuff. But if you're selling something that what I call is high consideration, so it might not be fully known by your buyers. There's typically many stakeholders in the B2B world that I live in, 6 to 12 right now, that might be part of a buying committee considering making a purchase or acquisition. And it's a big investment and tons of risk. When you lead with product first in this type of context, normally it spirals down. Your selling conversation goes nowhere. Your buyer's still learning. And so my argument is, don't lead with product at this point. Take a value-based approach to that buyer. And that's where, they become the hero, and you can guide them along their hero's journey and showing them how your solution might help them. But that comes later, not up front. And most sellers don't do this. Again, they show up product first. And it's probably no surprise then in the B2B world that I live in, where 75% of buyers prefer to have a sales-free experience. They're not into it. They know what's going to happen. The seller's just going to show up, talk about themselves and their product, and apply pressure, and they're not really into it. They're still trying to assimilate in their own brain. Hey, is this even relevant? Do we move forward, with this, or is there a case for change? They're asking bigger questions than product specific stuff. So that kind of gave rise to me writing the book. And so the book's called Inspire Your Buyers, Go to Market with a Story That Sizzles. Done really well. I think I'm up to 124 reviews. I'm still waiting for yours, Matt, but I'm sure it'll be in at any moment.
It's actually in the UK. So it's up there on Audible in the UK. So you just have to go to a different geography.
All right. I'm guilty as charged. Okay. But yeah, thank you so much. These reviews, it's so funny. I think 1% of your reading audience has the gumption to leave a review. So you are unusual, and I really appreciate it. But it's sold thousands of copies, and I've just been delighted. Some of the relationships I've struck because of that have just kind of blown me away. I had a guy sitting on, saying 14 boards down in Silicon Valley, knew the founders of Intel, an elderly man. Just got in touch with me one day. He just wanted to meet the author, and I'm like, oh, that's so cool. So it's been really well received. But any questions before we dig into some of the principles there, Matt or Jasmine?
No, I'm just really excited to know a little bit more about that framework, because I listened to it on the Audible book, and I know that the visuals that come along with the framework are just so powerful.
Well, I think, Matt, should we talk about how my brother sold me an old fishing boat? Because I think that just nails the framework so well. Do you guys like that?
That was one of the questions that I had lined up to ask you. So please do. It's like you're reading the script and I never showed it to you.
All right. This is one of my favorites because it just hits so close to home. But during the pandemic, this is about June of the pandemic, my brother gives me a call on a Saturday morning. And he's like going, "Hey, Bruce." And I'm like, "Hey, Steve. Hey, you don't call me all that often. What's going on?" And he's like going, "Well, I was talking to Dad, and he's decided he wants to sell his old fishing boat." And I'm like going, "Okay, I guess. What does that have to do with me?" And he's like going, "Well, he's decided he wants to sell it on Craigslist." And then I'm like going, okay, now I know what this has to do with me. And I go to my brother, Steve. My dad's 92 years old. He can barely turn on his laptop, let alone sell something on Craigslist. And I'm like going, okay, Steve, looks like, I'm selling Dad's boat on Craigslist. And Steve goes, "I was hoping you'd say that." And then he goes, "But I was thinking you might want to buy it." I'm going, I might want to buy it. What in the hell? That old fishing boat. I go, "Is it electric? Like my Tesla in the garage? Does it have a 49-inch monitor like the monitor on my desk? Is there anything cool about this thing?" And he goes, No, it's just an old fishing boat, but it's in really good condition. I'm like going, "Well, Steve, I literally, I don't get it. Why would I want to buy Dad's old fishing boat?" He goes, "Well, how long have you been living on that island?" And I live on an island across from Seattle, pretty big island. It's called Vashon Island. I've been living out there 16 years. So I'm like going, "Well, Steve, 16 years. He goes, "Wow, 16 years living on an island without a boat. Man, if I was you, I'd just feel trapped." I'm like going, "Trapped? What do you mean trapped?" He goes, "Yeah, I know you got that ferry system on the island that you guys can get on with your car, etc. But," he goes, "what happens if that earthquake hits that we're all expecting between 50 to 500 years from now? What if that hits? Gosh, if it was me living on an island with my family, I'd want to have a boat." I'm like going, "Well, huh." And he goes, "Yeah, or what about that volcano in your backyard. It's called Mount Rainier. It's about 14,000 feet tall. He goes, what if that thing decides to blow again? You know, there has been some activity. And he goes, gosh, if it was me living on an island with my family without a boat, I'd just feel trapped. I'm like going, well, hey, Steve, I'm not feeling trapped. I'll call you back tomorrow because I got to get into breakfast with my family here. But I'll call you back tomorrow, get more details about the boat, and I'll get to selling Dad's boat on Craigslist. And he goes, oh, thank you, Bruce. Okay, talk to you tomorrow. Click, click. So I'm glad that call came during the day on Saturday because that night I didn't really sleep all that well. I tossed and turned and I dreamt about zombies chasing me, you know, because it was during the pandemic. I thought about, you know, the earthquake. I thought about myself being down below my house trying to stitch together a makeshift raft with my kids' old swimming noodles. And then I, you know, couldn't wait to get out of bed in the morning. So I got out early and I knew my brother woke up early and I called him up and I go, hey, Steve, guess what? He's like, hey, well, what? I'm feeling trapped. And I go, is there any other good reason for me to buy Dad's boat? He's like going, well, you know, where you live, about every other mile around the Puget Sound, there's a marina. And your wife, Cindy, loves eating out. So you could take her out on that boat, call the kitchens, these marinas, their kitchens are still active. You could call in an order, a takeout order, go into that marina, pick it up, and just delight your wife. And I'm like just going, oh my gosh, would Dad's boat actually get me to those marinas? He's like going, yeah, it's got 14 inches of draft. As long as you kind of take it slow, if the wind kicks up and the waves kick up, yeah, you can pretty much go anywhere. I'm like going, wow, that sounds awesome. Fun and happy wife. That's what was just running through my head. And I'm like going, how could you lose with that? So, and how much does Dad want for it? And he goes, oh, not very much. And hey, Bruce, here's the kicker. I just tuned it up. So it's ready to go. It's awesome. I'm going, oh, cool, Steve. So anyways, talked to wife, got her on board. That weekend, I drove 400 miles and had a really brutal negotiation with my dad. He offered to sell it to me for $2,000. I countered with $3,000, and we met in the middle at $2,500. So it was pretty rough negotiation. But anyways, I drove that thing all the way back home, and I've been boating ever since. And during the pandemic, oh man, we just used the heck out of that, me and my kids, and we just had the time of our life running around. 35 degrees out, didn't matter. We were out on the boat goofing off. And so anyways, that's how my brother sold me an old fishing boat.
Your approach on you.
I hadn't written the book yet. And here's an old doctor who hadn't ever carried an enterprise sales bag in his life doing a perfect play. And, I mapped that back against my framework. But, to make this make sense, what he did is he targeted the right buyer. When he called me up, my brother's super smart, incredibly clever. Some might argue might be more clever than me, but I would argue against that. But anyways, he is brilliant, but he's not dumb either. He's not going to waste his time. That was a targeted call. He expected to sell me that boat. and he knew that I had a place to store it. I had money to buy it. I didn't have a boat, so he had done all his homework, of course, knowing me pretty well. And, I think he had it fixed in his mind that I was buying that thing. Next, what he did is he spotlighted my big problem. And he did that with one word, if you can remember. Do you guys remember the word he planted in my brain?
It was trapped.
Trapped. And once I heard that, I could not unhear it. And I even lost sleep over it. So he spotlighted my big problem. The reason I talk about spotlighting is because when you shine a spotlight on something, that becomes very bright and lit up. Everything else is in the dark. You just look at that. And he just landed, he planted that problem for me, trapped. And then just put this huge spotlight beam on it. And then, we didn't really move off that. And I even ended the call on that. I'm not trapped, but I'll call you back. But, we talked about being trapped. And he didn't move forward. There was no reason to. But the next morning, after losing sleep, I asked him, hey, I do feel trapped. Now, why else should I buy this thing? What's the desired outcome of all this? And then he helped me frame up in my brain fun for me, adventure and fun. That's one of my top values I just learned. and happy wife. I appreciate that too. Having good relationships in my life is also a big value of mine, and happy wife is part of that. So, anyways, double win. And I'm like just going, this is awesome. And once he had me on those two, of course, he created a lot of tension between those two. My big problem and that desired outcome of fun and happy wife, then, and he emphasized the contrast between those two and setting up those two poles for me. And then that made it really easy. Then and only then did we talk about Dad's boat. But did we talk about how many horsepower it had, or, was it 2-stroke or 4-stroke or anything else? No, we talked about it being a path, a way for me to not be trapped, and for me to have fun and a happy wife. And that was about it. He said, oh, it's got 14 inches of draft. When he said that, sadly, I didn't even know what that meant, nor did I really care. All I cared about was, hey, is it going to get me to these awesome places that you're promising? He goes, yeah, just take it slow. Then, after he had me there, then he talked about some next steps with me. Because I did ask him, hey, how do I get this thing? And he goes, hey, do you still have that old Lexus? Yeah. Does it have a trailer hitch on it by any chance? Yeah. I used to put my bike rack in it. And he goes, there you go. Yeah, all you need is to show up at U-Haul, get a little trailer hitch, stick it in that tow hitch, and you can tow Dad's boat tomorrow. Cool. Where do I park it? And he goes, well, do you still have that parking lot up by your yurt? And I'm like going, yeah. There's still a parking lot up there. Absolutely. Anything in it? No, it's actually empty. Yeah, just stick the boat in the corner back there. And then I called him as I was towing it back and just get some other real-time support. So he laid out those next steps really easily and allowed me to go buy that boat. So any questions about that? That is my framework. Target the right buyer. Once you've done that, then you can introduce a problem. Then from there, move on to the outcome. Then from there, if they're convinced, then you can move into the solution domain. And then from there, next steps. Now, the problem, outcome, solution, I call that the POS model. So a way to remember this is when you're at the point of sale, remember the POS, which stands for problem, outcome, solution. In that order, most sellers start with solution, but no, I'm hoping all your listeners will start with the problem, especially if they have a high consideration solution where the buyer needs to learn a little bit more about this.
And is it more effective to tease out the problem in an emotional way? Like going back to the example of the boat, that word trapped evokes a lot of emotion.
Yeah. Who wants to be trapped? Yeah, I don't know anybody. It does. Yeah, and that's the beauty. I work in the world of B2B, and there's kind of wisdom around this. At the end of the day, we're all human, and we buy on emotion and justify with logic is typically the catchphrase. I sometimes I think of myself as a valuologist, where I'm trying to look at different dimensions of value. Emotional value is just huge. Mark Schaefer, who Matt and I know pretty well, he was involved with a $5 billion big bet with a partner to a very huge company he used to work with. And they had one of the best rock star salespeople in the world, the people selling to Mark. And Mark, self-admits, emotion was a big part of that buying decision. But then move into the financial value, the operational value. Sometimes organizations are concerned about sustainability and brand-oriented value that comes from that. So there's different dimensions, or there's even, return on future that some of our clients, one of our clients, Verizon, will put networks in for organizations where they can put things on top of that network in the future that they couldn't do before without the network. So you don't really know what that value is going to be, but there's value in these options in the future. Return on future is what we've coined. So there's different dimensions, but I'd say, emotion is one of those rings that rules them all. Very important to nail the emotional side of value.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much for today, Bruce. I've learned so much, and it's been brilliant having you on. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all your insights. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Jasmine. My pleasure.